Dragon Age The Veilguard broke me. It broke my heart, broke my spirit, and put me on the path to having a hairline like my main man Solas. After playing 40 hours of Veilguard, finishing all companion quests, and completing the main story, I have to say it's the weakest game in the series. Veilguard ultimately feels like a husk of Dragon Age's former glory, shambling through this cruel, cold world of AAA gaming in 2024 in search of its next victim. It's a tragedy of wasted potential that fails to match the dark fantasy tone that we know as Dragon Age. But is the game completely irredeemable? It's no secret that this game has been getting dogpiled in numerous YouTube videos and forum posts. Veilguard currently has a 3.9 user score on Metacritic, but 75% of the Steam reviews are positive and recommend the game. So what's going on here? It's easy to pull up clips of the cringiest dialogue, the Pixar-ass art style, or the janky facial animations that scream, "My face is tired," and simply write off Veilguard as another steaming pile of AAA garbage, but this is not the full picture. Because, at times, Dragon Age The Veilguard is absolutely brilliant in its storytelling, and occasionally does capture that magical dark tone of past games. Bafflingly, the ending to this game is one of the best endings to any RPG I've ever played, standing toe-to-toe with the likes of Baldur's Gate 3 and Mass Effect 2. The final mission brings a phenomenally satisfying conclusion to the story that began in Inquisition, and had me scratching my head wondering, where was this kind of quality in the rest of the game? Playing Dragon Age The Veilguard is kinda like having a family member with Alzheimer's. They're mostly all gone, but occasionally you'll get a flash of lucidity that makes you think, Dragon Age is back, baby! But then the moment fades, and the game snaps back to cringeworthy dialogue, mediocre combat and quests, and an insufferably quirky and cute tone that made me question whether Disney covertly bought the IP. The reality is, the cringy dialogue, the goofy tone, the mediocre gameplay, and the brilliant moments all coexist in the same messy package that is Dragon Age The Veilguard. In this video, I'm going to do a deep dive critique on The Veilguard, comparing it with past entries in the Dragon Age series, as well as some contemporary titles like Baldur's Gate 3. There will be a ton of spoilers in this video, mostly in the later parts where we touch on the story, but I'll give you a heads up when I start talking about that stuff, so you can plug your virgin ears if you want to. But anyhow, this intro has gone on long enough, so let's buckle up, grab some iced coffee, and dive into my review of Dragon Age The Veilguard.
Gotcha! Oh, people!
Dragon Age has always been a series punctuated by a dark, gritty tone. It tackled disturbing, world-shaking events and controversial subjects with a dramatic and skillful touch. Occasionally, Dragon Age games would have lighthearted moments and silly banter, but this was always done to provide relief from otherwise very dark stories. Unfortunately, Dragon Age The Veilguard has flipped the formula on its head, trading dark fantasy for a Disney-esque lighthearted fantasy romp. Dragon Age The Veilguard is a story about evil ancient gods hell-bent on destroying the world, yet the tone of the game doesn't match the story content at all. I'd say 90 to 95% of the game has a lighthearted tone, with darker moments used only as window dressing. This is the vibe of Veilguard in a nutshell.
You have to promise to behave, boy. Listen to every word I say, stay out of trouble, don't do anything dumb, and don't eat any.
I think we get the point.
And this will be so instructive for Manfred. Ah, Rook, just in time.
The two of you together, this looks like trouble.
The darker subjects that do exist in this game are treated unseriously. Let's take a look at how the Veilguard handles necromancy, for instance. Raising the dead is typically seen as a dark, evil art in most fantasy games. Necromancers cast aside societal norms and sensibilities in search of power, knowledge, or some other twisted motivation. In the Veilguard, our companion Emmerich is a necromancer, but the vibe of this character is just a goofy, quirky guy who likes to raise the dead. His skeleton buddy Manfred is just treated as a story prop for some cute and comedic relief that undercuts anything darker about the realities of necromancy. Let's compare this with how necromancy is treated in Dragon Age 2. During the second act of the game, Hawk has to track down a serial killer who has been targeting women in a series of brutal attacks throughout Kirkwall. It turns out this guy was a necromancer who was trying to recreate his dearly departed wife by snatching body parts from other women throughout the city, including tragically the protagonist's own mother. Hawk is able to foil this necromancer's plot, but not in time to save his mom.
There's nothing I can do. His magic was keeping her alive.
I knew you would come.
You know me. I always save the day.
Shh. Don't fret, darling. That man would have kept me trapped in here. But now, I'm free. I'll be with Carver and Bethany and your father. But you'll be all alone.
Say hello to them for me.
I'll talk more about Emmerich later in this video, because his companion quest was my favorite one, and I think the idea for it was great, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. But I digress. When the Veilguard does venture into darker subjects like blood magic, it only tackles them at the most shallow surface level. They might toss a few blood spatters or dead bodies into the environment during quests, but the subject matter is only given the most cursory treatment. Why do mages perform blood magic in the Veilguard? Because they're big, meanie heads that just crave power, and that's as deep as it gets. The Tevinter Imperium is the heart of blood magic in Thedas, and yet we only get the most surface-level look at blood mages in the Veilguard. Let's compare this with Jawin in Dragon Age Origins. Jawin was a circle mage in training who was on the verge of going through the Rite of Tranquility. It cuts off a person from the Fade, so they are no longer capable of getting possessed by demons, but the price is that they can no longer feel any emotions either. Jawin was in love with a Chantry priestess, so he sought to study blood magic as a way to escape the Circle Tower and run away with his beloved. But in the end, he is cornered by the Templars, and his new girlfriend dumps his ass when she sees him use blood magic.
The mage's prison. No. Please, no. Not there.
No! I won't let you touch her!
By the Maker. Blood magic. How could you? You said you never...
I admit, I dabbled. I thought it would make me a better mage.
Blood magic is evil, Jawin. It corrupts people, changes them.
I'm going to give it up. All magic. I just want to be with you, Lily. Please come with me.
I trusted you. I was ready to sacrifice everything for you. I don't know who you are, Blood Mage. Stay away from me.
Another great example is Orsino in Dragon Age 2. Pushed to the brink by the Templars and facing certain death, the first enchanter resorts to blood magic to try and save the mages. But in the process, he becomes a twisted abomination that ends up attacking everyone, so his plan backfires horribly. Hell, even the Dragon Age anime Netflix show did a far better job of exploring the dangers and motivations of blood mages than the Veilguard does. The darkest thing we see involving blood magic in the Veilguard is probably Nev's quest, but the mage's victims are just used as props in the quest. This particular mage has no motivations other than power, and so the story ends up falling flat on its face for a lack of depth. The only time I felt like this game nailed the tone was whenever Solas was on screen. Solas is by far the most interesting character in the game, and uncovering his past memories or conversing with him in the Fade was a strong highlight for me. Remember when game prices were lower and Solas had a full head of hair? Well, instant gaming can take you back to that era with great discounts on new releases, bundles, and game subscriptions. With over 10 million satisfied customers and over 650,000 5-star Trustpilot reviews, instant gaming is the premier place to buy your games and keep more money in your pocket. Whether you're playing on PC, Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo Switch, instant gaming has the best deals on top RPGs and action games like Space Marine 2, Black Myth Wukong, Metaphor ReFantazio, and even Dragon Age if you still want to get that game for some reason. So what are you waiting for? Click on my link in the description or pinned comment to create an Instant Gaming account and start saving on the best games today. Big shout out to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. I could pull up numerous examples of this game's tone-deaf nature and why it feels like a game in an entirely different franchise, but I'll save that for another video, because we've got a lot more to talk about in this review, so let's keep things moving. The combat in Dragon Age The Veilguard is like a mix between Mass Effect, Hogwarts Legacy, and God of War. And while that might sound pretty good to some of you on paper, in practice it's pretty underwhelming. I decided to play as a mage, and for me, Veilguard just felt like a scuffed version of Hogwarts Legacy. For most of the game, you'll just be fighting hordes of Darkspawn, Venatori, and Renegade Kunari, all of whom have very similar attack patterns and weaknesses. The enemies are spongy as hell, and so every combat encounter just becomes a boring, predictable slog. Also, the overly colorful spell and ground effects create a visual mess to the point where you'll be wondering what the hell is even happening in some of these encounters. Most hilariously for me, there's a boss fight near the end of the game that must be finished off with a stagger melee prompt, but there were so many spell effects and visual clutter on the screen that I didn't even notice the prompt for like 5 to 10 seconds while I was ending the fight. The companions are pretty much only useful whenever their abilities are off cooldown. I wish we could at least switch to them to try out different playstyles and classes, but hey, I guess I want too much. After realizing I wasn't really enjoying the combat, I decided to just crank the difficulty down to get through encounters faster and focus on the story. I think some players will have fun with Veilguard's combat, and if that is you, then more power to you, but this gameplay just ain't for me, bro. Also, side note, the auto-targeting for staffs in this game is f***ing terrible. Just watch this. The progression systems in the game also leave a lot to be desired, particularly the skill tree. The constellation-like pattern provides the illusion of depth. In reality, you'll just be buying incremental stat upgrades in between the new spells and abilities you actually want to unlock. It's very reminiscent of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, actually. I much prefer the more straightforward ability upgrades and unlocks that we had in Origins and Inquisition, because the extra nodes in between just look like they were designed to be used as a marketing piece to pretend like Veilguard is a deeper RPG than it actually is. So let's talk about quest content and exploration. Before release, the devs spoke a lot about crafting more meaningful quests and striving for quality over quantity. But if this was truly the goal, then BioWare failed spectacularly to achieve it. Outside of the companion quests and main story, most of the side quests are simple fetch and kill quests without any meaningful choices or interesting storytelling. You embark on such riveting adventures as collecting lost Dalish artifacts, clearing out strongholds of demons, and rescuing a bunch of retards who got lost in the woods. Unfortunately, the Veilguard is basically Inquisition 2.0 when it comes to side quests. And the exploration is not much better either. I knew Veilguard wasn't going to be an open world game, but I was expecting something more like the Outer Worlds, which had a small number of fairly open zones that we could explore throughout the game. Instead, we have maps reminiscent of the claustrophobic corridors of Dragon Age 2. Almost all the maps are collections of linear hallways, with a few offshoots here and there, filled with enemies and randomized loot. If you're looking to scratch that exploration itch, then this game will surely disappoint you. Companion quests are treated with better storytelling and depth than other side quests, but the results are very mixed. Spoilers incoming, by the way. I was underwhelmed by the stories of Lucanus, Nev, and Tasha's side quests. Harding's side quest was pretty interesting as it expanded on the lore of the Titans. Davrin's quest was decent, but nothing too crazy. I was captivated by Balara's quest at first, but the ending kinda ruined it. Her long-lost brother Syrian, who she thought was dead, ended up becoming a servant to Andruil, one of the Evanuris. He started performing rituals on other Dalish clan members to help expand Andruil's power, and for most of the quest, it seemed like Balara was going to have to kill her own brother to stop the rituals, which added some real conflict and tension to the quest. But at the very end, BioWare ruined it by having the brothers snap out of it at the last minute, only to get immediately killed by Andrul. So much for posing the player with a difficult decision. By far the most interesting quest was Emric's. Homeboy pledged to turn himself into a lich to overcome his fear of death by becoming an immortal undead. But in his quest to take down an actually evil necromancer, his beloved skeleton buddy Manfred ends up getting ganked. So in the end, Emric must decide whether to perform a ritual to revive Manfred or turn himself into a lich. I decided to choose the latter option because it was the first morally questionable decision I stumbled upon in the game. So I Sparta-kicked Manfred's old sack of bones into the abyss and helped the homie Emric complete his transformation. And surprisingly, BioWare does fully commit to having Emric appear as a lich for the rest of the game, although sometimes he does swap back to his human form, but I'm not sure if that's a bug or not. But here's what kind of ruins this quest for me. Nobody even mildly objects to Emric's decision to turn himself into a lich. Liches are typically seen as evil abominations in fiction, but God forbid we actually confront anyone's personal decisions, so the whole team just accepts Emric's choice to become undead. And literally no one cares that Manfred was sacrificed in the process either, myself included, to be honest. But despite these criticisms, Emric's quest was still my favorite one because it was the only companion quest that actually posed a significant choice that had real consequences in the game. Most other companion quests have hollow, empty choices that don't really impact anything else in the game world, aside from a little bit of dialogue and maybe a different end slide. There's nothing on the scale of sacrificing or sparing Bull's chargers, or changing Cole into a spirit or human like we saw in Dragon Age Inquisition, and certainly nothing on the scale of Shadowheart or Astarion's quests in Baldur's Gate 3. And sadly, the lack of significant player choice is true for the rest of the game as well, making Veilguard the weakest game in the series from a role-playing perspective. Let's start with the protagonist, Rook. The character creation options are pretty good, with lots of customization options for hairstyles, facial features, and overall appearance. You can choose to play as a human, elf, dwarf, or Kunari, and have 4 different voice options for Rook as well, similar to Inquisition. You'll also choose a faction, which gives Rook some unique dialogue options throughout the game. I wanted to create a Kunari character, but sadly the faction options don't jive well with a strict follower of the Kun, so I ended up going for a free-wielding Kunari member of the Shadow Dragons, an anti-slavery group operating in Tevinter. The dialogue options in the Veilguard are reminiscent of Fallout 4, and almost every conversation option is slightly different flavors of bland and polite. If you want to play a more hard-ass or evil character, then this is not the game for you because those options simply do not exist. Even compared to the more restrictive role-playing options of Hawk in Dragon Age 2, at least the dialogue options in that game felt like distinct personalities. For instance, humorous Hawk was way different than a more direct or judgmental Hawk.
If I hear anything I don't like, you're dead.
And Dragon Age 2 also let you make evil choices or even play as a blood mage, neither of which you can do in the Veilguard. As for story choices, and here's where the video is going to start going heavily into spoiler territory by the way, there is, drumroll please, one major story choice you can make before the ending. Prior to the final mission of the game, the only significant story choice is whether you choose to save Treviso or Minrathous from the Blighted Dragon attack. The city you go to second becomes blighted, which significantly changes the quests you will do there for the rest of the game. Plus, it tanks your reputation with a major faction, as well as one of your companions, either Nev or Lucanus. But aside from that, every other choice is an illusion. The most you'll get is some unique dialogue, if you're even presented with a choice at all. This is a far cry from past Dragon Age games, especially Origins and Inquisition. In Dragon Age Inquisition, you could choose the new ruler of Orlais, side with either the Templars or Mages, which significantly altered the main story, choose to save either Hawk or the Grey Warden, and determine the fate of the Wardens in general. Not to mention side quests like Bull's Chargers. Veilguard is just way too linear for an RPG made by a studio that used to be known for providing extensive player choice. And to me, that is the most disappointing thing about this game, and why it fell far short of my hopes for a sequel to Inquisition. Alright, let's talk about the main story and writing quality of the Veilguard. This section is going to heavily get into spoilers, so if you don't want to know how this game goes, then turn back now. The first mission of the game is honestly pretty great. We create our character, meet up with Varric and our new crew, and stop Solas from performing a ritual to tear down the veil. Varric and one of your companions get horribly injured in the process, and 2 elven gods escape from the prison Solas put them in. Solas gets trapped in the Fade, and then ends up like Johnny Silverhand, speaking directly in Rook's head at several points in the game. But now Solas gets shoved far into the background, and the game gets pretty boring as you go on a bunch of missions to recruit your new companions, and develop a plan to stop the elven gods. Elgernon and Gillenane are extremely boring and one-dimensional villains. Much like Corypheus in Dragon Age Inquisition, all they care about is power. So for me, it was very hard to get invested in the story of these villains, especially when compared to Solas. Outside of the main story, we can explore Solas' memories through a major side quest, and this is some of the best story content in the game. Also, seeing Solas before he went bald hit a little too close to home for me, as my hair ain't as thick as it used to be. One of the big problems with the main story in Veilguard is that the pacing is totally f***ed. Just as you're building up speed towards the ending, the game dumps a bunch of companion quests and faction quests into your lap, which you have to complete if you want to get a chance at the best ending. Veilguard basically copied the blueprint of Mass Effect 2. You earn your companions' loyalty by completing their quest lines, and this gives them a better chance to survive the final mission. I mean, if you're gonna copy any game, it's definitely a good idea to copy one of your best games from the past. I just think it would have been better if we could have started working on the companion quests earlier in the game. Veilguard also attempted to copy the big companion confrontations of Mass Effect 2, but the results were not so good.
I can't believe you're asking for a favor as though nothing's happened.
What crapped in your bed?
Sorry, didn't know you two were in the
Rook,
middle of...
excellent. Come in. We could use a second sober voice.
I'm not drunk. You're drunk.
It's a figure of speech.
I was wondering when this had happened.
I don't follow.
You two didn't seem to be bonding.
I need one of these little needle things to dig some crap out of my armor. Death Mage won't give me one.
First, a bone threader is an extremely delicate instrument. Second, it's Emmerich. Tash, my name is Emmerich, not Death Mage, not Corpse Guy, not... I won't repeat the rest.
Let's compare this to Miranda and Jack in Mass Effect 2.
Touch me and I will smear the walls with you, bitch!
Enough! Stand down, both of you.
The cheerleader won't admit what Cerberus did to me was wrong.
It wasn't Cerberus. Not really. But clearly you were a mistake.
Screw you! You've got no idea what they put me through. Maybe it's time I showed you.
Our mission is too important to let personal feelings get in the way.
Fuck your feelings. I just want her dead.
You both know what we're up against. Save your anger for the collectors.
I can put aside my differences until the mission's over.
Sure, I'll do my part. I'd hate to see her die before I get a chance to fillet her myself.
Man, BioWare just really ain't what it used to be. Veilguard also has cameo appearances from several past companions, including Varric, Morrigan, Dorian, and most surprisingly, Isabella. But their inclusion in the game is a mixed bag, especially considering you can't really talk to these characters or ask them many questions about their past. Varric is sidelined and shoved into a bedroom for the whole game for reasons I will mention later, so we barely interact with him at all. Morrigan will not talk about the events of Dragon Age's origins, nor whether she has a child or not. However, Morrigan will reveal that she absorbed a piece of Mythal, so she can provide information about the Dreadwolf and Mythal's connection with him, which was pretty cool. And if you never played a Dragon Age game before, you'd never even know that Isabella was in 2 previous games because she never mentions Ferelden or Kirkwall or Hawk, or even how she came to be the leader of the Lords of Fortune. Dorian probably had the most satisfying inclusion because he has a whole side quest where you can make him the Archon of Tevinter or side with his friend Maevaris Talani, who was mentioned during the Trespasser DLC. Your Inquisitor will also make an appearance in the game, but I somehow missed the option to create mine during the character creation screen, so I ended up with the default Sola Velen who romanced Solas. But anyhow, after going through some linear missions and cleaning up your companion quests, you'll eventually find out where the gods are hatching their own plan to tear down the veil. And the way you get this information is kinda ridiculous. One of the Kunari Antom leaders makes himself willingly go insane so he can learn the location where the god's ritual will take place, just so he can give that info to Rook. So he essentially just sacrifices himself, and with his dying breath, he yells out, "They're at Tearstone Island!" And I just burst out laughing, man. You can't make this shit up.
I see Tearstone Island! The ritual! Tearstone Island!
But anyhow, let's talk about the best part of Dragon Age The Veilguard, which is the ending. The final mission of Dragon Age The Veilguard was absolutely incredible in my opinion. It follows the same blueprint of Mass Effect 2's final mission, where you have to select companions for certain roles in the mission. If you choose the wrong person for the job, or skip their loyalty quest, then someone can wind up dead. I miraculously managed to stumble through the whole mission and only lost one companion. You will always lose either Harding or Davrin, depending on who you choose for the first squad leader, because this is essentially an Ashley versus Caden type moment. Balara ended up getting blighted during my final run, which added some tension for my mission since her and Rook were in a relationship. Anyhow, after killing Gillinane and losing Davrin, Rook gets trapped in the Fade and Solas escapes with the Lyrium dagger. And at this point, in an M. Night Shyamalan twist, we learn that Varric actually died during the first mission of the game. Rook continued to see him in the lighthouse because Solas was mind-fucking him. So the real reason he wasn't more involved in the main plot is because he was dead. I really didn't like this. Varric was always my favorite companion along with Iron Bull, and he was basically the face of the franchise at this point. It's almost like BioWare killing him off is a symbolic severing of ties with the past identity of Dragon Age in favor of this new direction they are going with. So yeah, that was pretty crazy. But after escaping from the Fade, Rook will temporarily team up with Solas and fight his way towards Elgar'nan. It was awesome watching the Dreadwolf really cut loose and just show off his true powers. Ultimately, we learned that Solas was planning to betray us again, no surprise there, because if we wiped out the last of the Evanuris, then there would be nothing stopping Solas from tearing down the Veil. So the team hatches a plan to either trick, force, or convince Solas to bind himself to the Veil and save the world of Thedas as we know it. And after defeating Elgar'nan, we get that chance to either complete Solas' redemption arc or banish his ass to the Shadow Realm. I really like the ending where we convince Solas to stand down, especially given the presence of Morrigan/Mythal and an Elven Inquisitor who romanced Solas in Dragon Age Inquisition. For me, this moment really brought about a satisfying conclusion to Solas' story and the events set forth in Trespasser and Inquisition. But was it worth it to slog through over 35 hours of mediocre or bad content to get to this point? Man, I'm not so sure. At the end of the day, Dragon Age The Veilguard is all over the place. The highs of the game are extremely high, and the low points are approaching the core of the Earth. Many of us waited 10 years for this sequel to come out, and unfortunately the game just fails to deliver on the experience I wanted to see. The decline in writing quality, the ever-narrowing scope of player choices, the lack of respect for past choices, the trend chasing, the massive shift in tone, the budget animations and Pixar-ass art style, all of these things detract from what could have been a great game. Dragon Age The Veilguard is a story of wasted potential. Unfortunately, this was not the masterpiece or BioWare's big comeback story that many of us hoped for. But despite my disappointment, I did still enjoy parts of the game, and I'm glad that I played it. At the end of the day, I give Dragon Age The Veilguard a 6.5 out of 10. If you're already a Dragon Age fan, then this is worth picking up when it's on sale. But if you're new to the series, I would start from the beginning instead, or at the very least, play Inquisition before Veilguard. So there you have it, my review and critique of Dragon Age The Veilguard. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to Big Dan Gaming for more Dragon Age and RPG videos. Big shout out to all the channel members for supporting my content. Until next time, this has been Big Dan. I should go.